When I originally heard this story, the story we're going to be talking about accurately in this video, I didn't really intend to make a video on it. To me, it just didn't really seem like that big of a deal, but lo and behold, it ends up becoming a much larger deal. But even further, it was reported so poorly with so much misinformation around it that now I almost feel forced or a little bit obligated to actually make a video because so many of you have been reaching out to me around this with misinformation because you were misinformed by somebody else covering this. So what's actually going on? Well, basically, there's been a recall on power armor collectible helmets for Fallout because of concerns that mold is growing in them, with the explicit listing being mold can be present on the fabric insert inside the helmet, posing a risk of respiratory or other infections in individuals with compromised immune systems, damaged lungs, or an allergy to mold. And pretty obviously, you could see how this is bad. You put on this very tight helmet where it's probably hard to breathe in and get stuffy pretty quick, and then you have a bunch of mold in there and you're just inhaling that. That's not fun, not healthy, not good. And if you go to the official source of this recall, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, you could find a ton of additional details around this. The recall was actually issued 5 days ago. It's a little bit of old news right now. It just kind of started making the rounds, and there you could actually see an image of it. That image to you may look pretty familiar, as it looks pretty similar to this, the power armor helmet in the collector's edition of Fallout 76. But I know this may come as a shock. Even though the two things look similar, they actually are different, and you could figure that out just by reading slightly down this page. You can see in the product details section that this was actually only sold online at GameStop.com starting in June of 2019. So actually having nothing to do with the Power Armor edition of the game. This actually sold for $150. As a result of this recall, you are entitled to an entire refund. And actually, just an aside, it says that 20,000 or so units of these are out there, and at $150 a piece, that means $3 million was made off of these, at least in revenue. That's absolutely insane. I can't believe that many people bought these. That's besides the point, but it also is worth pointing out, although this is kind of Bethesda's problem because they licensed this and allowed someone to use the Fallout brand while creating this helmet, it's not really Bethesda directly. Again, it was sold on GameStop.com. This was actually manufactured by Chronicle LLC, based in Texas, but manufactured in China. So I honestly wouldn't be shocked if Bethesda was pretty far removed from this whole process. So that's what actually happened from the original source of this recall, yet it seems like some people found that just to be a little bit too difficult to follow or to interpret, as we did see several of the initial articles reporting on this talk about how it was actually the Power Armor edition of the game. Like, I get it, the two look similar, this Power Armor helmet versus that Power Armor helmet, but they're different. If you read the website, it's immediately clear these are different. But more or less, immediately following this going a little bit more widespread, we saw articles reporting that the Power Armor edition of the game actually had this mold recall. We saw this from DualShockers, but then also other websites following it up like IGN and even Prima Games. The reason for that, as with in IGN's case, they actually just took the information from DualShockers and reposted it on their own website, changing around some of the words in the middle, but evidently going to the original source was a little bit too hard for them. But in essence, what this led to was a lot of people thinking that the Power Armor edition of this game was having these mold problems. As of right now, it doesn't seem like there's anything wrong with the Power Armor edition. Considering that was manufactured over a year ago at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a slightly different manufacturing process. Probably went for something cheaper, and that's what led to these issues. But the Power Armor edition helmets still seem to be totally fine, while these GameStop ones are not totally fine. On each of the articles now, you actually find a statement from Bethesda, who had to update them, saying the helmets that are being recalled are not from our Fallout 76 Power Armor edition, but are instead a different line of helmets sold exclusively by GameStop. The Fallout 76 Power Armor edition helmets are unaffected. Consumers should visit the product recall page for instructions if they have purchased the GameStop helmet. And GameStop reports that you can contact them, but they also will be contacting everyone who purchased this helmet. So the reporting on this, obviously really bad. That's led to a lot of misinformation being spread by multiple sources. But even further, I find myself questioning, is this really a story? I kind of feel two ways about this. On one hand, Bethesda has messed up a lot with Fallout 76, both in-game, which isn't even all that rare nowadays. A lot of companies mess up in-game, like selling a $7 fridge, kind of a questionable decision. But in particular with Fallout 76, there's been a lot of issues out of game, whether it be with the company itself or its oversight, but also with merchandise. We had the bag kerfuffle that led to a lot of people being very upset. We also had some issues with the Nuka Dark Rum and how those bottles were weirdly misleading. And now, almost a year after release, we have this issue with Moldy helmets. On one hand, if you took the Moldy helmet in isolation, it feels like a non-story to me. This really isn't that big of a deal. Obviously, Moldy helmets are no joke, but it's not a huge outrage or crazy thing to happen. But when you take it with everything else that happened, it obviously makes it a little bit more important, and that's why it's getting as much attention as it is. But my question is, should it? On one hand, if this many issues are happening around a game, that's probably indication of a larger issue that's leading to all these other ones. But also at the same time, I kind of feel like, really? We're still talking about little silly things like this? I guess what it really boils down to is it's kind of crazy to me that this isn't all over by now, that there's still these prevalence of issues both in-game and out. So either way, that's what actually happened with the Moldy helmet. Might not be quite what you heard from other sources, but this is pretty accurate. I'll have links to everything down below. With all that being said though, I thank you again for watching, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.